Hey everyone, today this explainer is going to dive into the absolutely fascinating 2 millennia-long story of Spain. We're going to explore how its dramatic historical pendulum swings actually built the modern nation we see today. If you want to understand how a single geographical location can experience the absolute extremes of global dominance, devastating collapse, and then a remarkable rebirth, well, you are in the exact right place. Since we are synthesizing over 2,000 years of history today, here is our roadmap. We'll be hitting the roots of a unified Hispania, the crossroads of three cultures, the global Spanish Empire, the imperial decline and civil war, the Franco era and beyond, and finally, modern Spain's complex reality. Let's get right into it. So keep this core question in mind as we go. How exactly did a peninsula hanging off the edge of Europe conquer the globe, lose it all, and then manage to rebuild? The answer is this wild, captivating cycle of consolidation, breathtaking expansion, and dramatic collapse. To truly understand Spain today, we have to understand this pendulum effect. Starting off with Section 1, Roots of a Unified Hispania. This story builds really rapidly. We start way back in the Upper Paleolithic era. Think of the brilliant prehistoric artists and their vivid cave paintings in Altamira. From there, we fast forward through Bronze Age metallurgical hubs like Las Milleares. But, the real structural unification, that kicked off in the 3rd century BCE with the Roman conquest. They literally stitched the peninsula together into a single entity they called Hispania. And when Roman power eventually faded, the Visigoths swept in during the 5th century, set up a capital in Toledo, and actually laid down the geopolitical precursors for the Spain we know today. What's super fascinating here is the direct then and now connection. The Romans didn't just lay down physical roads connecting administrative cities like Tarraco, they fundamentally rewired the culture. In fact, their adoption of Latin is the exact reason Spanish is the second most spoken language globally today. That deep imprint of Roman administration created this powerful idea of a unified Hispania that simply never faded away. Moving on to Section 2, Crossroads of Three Cultures. Okay, picture this. The year is 711 CE. Islamic forces cross the Strait of Gibraltar, replacing a pretty unstable Visigothic rule with a remarkably sophisticated new order known as Al-Andalus. The crucial point here is that Al-Andalus brought an era of unprecedented religious tolerance to the peninsula. You had Muslims, Christians, and Jews coexisting and collaborating. It's actually where classical Greek and Roman texts were preserved and translated, texts that would eventually cross the Pyrenees and literally help fuel the European Renaissance. And here is where we really see that historical pendulum swing hard. We go from the intellectual inclusivity and architectural marvels of Al-Andalus straight into the Reconquista. This was a massive, centuries-long Christian military push to reclaim the peninsula. As those Christian kingdoms pushed south, the entire societal dynamic shifted. That tolerant atmosphere was slowly but surely replaced by a push to enforce strict religious and cultural homogeneity. Now, if you want a pivot point, the year 1492 is arguably the single most pivotal turning point in all of Spanish history. It's wild. It marks the brutal internal consolidation of the state, including the capture of Granada, ending Moorish rule, and the tragic expulsion of the Jewish population to mandate Catholic orthodoxy under Isabella and Ferdinand. But at the exact same time, 1492 is the exact moment Spain turned its gaze outward to the globe, funding Christopher Columbus's voyage to the Americas. Which brings us to Section 3, the global Spanish Empire. We've all heard the phrase, right? The sun never sets on the Spanish Empire. But during Spain's golden age under the Habsburg dynasty, this quote was a literal geographic reality. Spain's dominions stretched massively across the Americas, Europe, Asia, and Africa. They were the undisputed global superpower of the era, deeply influencing global politics, trade, and culture. But an empire of that staggering magnitude isn't built on royal ambition alone. It was built on cutting-edge innovation. Spanish explorers utilized the mariner's compass and the astrolabe for unprecedented navigational accuracy in the open sea. They locked down naval dominance with shipborne artillery and achieved terrestrial supremacy with superior armor, horses, and weaponry. It was exactly this technological edge that allowed Juan Sebastian Elcano to complete the very first global circumnavigation. Spain was literally mapping the modern world. But no empire lasts forever. Section 4, Imperial Decline and Civil War. I absolutely love this concept of the Indianos because it perfectly humanizes the macro-level decline of an entire nation. Fast forward to 1898, following the Spanish-American War. Spain had just lost its remaining major colonies, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. It was a profound shock to the national identity. The Indianos, the Spaniards who returned home from the Americas with wealth and new ideas, became these incredibly potent symbols in literature, representing a country violently torn between its glorious imperial past and a really uncertain reality in the modern era. This deep existential and political fracturing ultimately exploded into the tragic Spanish Civil War in 1936. This was a devastating internal conflict between the Republic defending leftist Popular Front and the military-backed conservative nationalists. And it wasn't just a local civil war either. It almost instantly morphed into a proxy war for major international powers. The nationalists had heavy backing from fascist Italy and Nazi Germany, while the Republic drew support from the Soviet Union and international volunteers. It was a terrifying, brutal preview of the global conflict that was just about to erupt. That brings us to Section 5, the Franco era and beyond. 300,000. Let that sink in for a second. That is the staggering estimated number of Spaniards imprisoned during the post-war period of General Francisco Franco's nearly four-decade dictatorship. Dividing the populace into the victors and the vanquished became the deeply painful everyday reality of social order in Spain. The repression during this era was both physical and psychological. Franco's totalitarian regime utilized incredibly strict censorship, especially in cinema, to manipulate public perception, erase dissent, and enforce a highly romanticized nationalist vision of the country. This deliberate, systematic isolation fundamentally detached Spain from the post-WW2 European network. It quite literally held the nation back from the rapid modernization happening across the rest of the continent until Franco's regime finally concluded in the late 1970s. And finally, Section 6, Modern Spain's Complex Reality. So while Spain successfully and honestly, somewhat miraculously, transitioned to a modern European democracy post-1975, it hasn't been completely smooth sailing. The legacy of domestic political bargains and lax banking regulations heavily exposed the country during the 2008 global financial crash. An over-leveraged banking system and a massive real estate bubble burst, pushing Spain right to the brink of default and leaving deep economic scars that the country is still actively working to heal today. And here is a pretty stark reality check. Despite its incredibly rich history and its current status as one of the world's top global economies, Spain is still grappling with severe domestic hurdles. They are facing a crippling youth unemployment rate hovering around 40%. That is a massive challenge when you're trying to sustain economic growth and keep young, educated talent from leaving the country. Yet even with those domestic challenges, you can't deny that Spain's cultural and diplomatic footprint remains absolutely massive. Remember that Roman assimilation we talked about? Well, Spanish is the second most spoken language on Earth today. The architectural genius of Antoni Gaudí with the Sagrada Familia, the literary masterpieces of Miguel de Cervantes, these continue to shape global culture. Today, Spain brilliantly balances its deep-rooted artistic traditions with a highly progressive global presence, actively participating in international security and peacekeeping missions. Which leaves us with one final provocative thought. Think about these 2,000 years of incredible resilience. Think about those massive pendulum swings between global dominance, isolation, and internal fracture. Spain is practically a masterclass in survival and adaptation. So as they balance the pressures of an aging population against the urgent need for economic growth, what will their next chapter look like? Whatever happens next, it's guaranteed to be just as fascinating as its past. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the history that shapes our world today.